The stars were quiet, but something was wrong. On the edge of the Orion Arm, a small human colony floated around a yellow sun. It had farms, schools, and parks. Children played under thin domes while ships brought food from Earth. Nobody expected danger. They were far from war, far from old enemies. But in the darkness beyond their scanners, eyes were watching. A single freighter was leaving the colony when it saw the first flash. At first the crew thought it was a flare from the sun. Then came another flash. Then dozens. In minutes the colony's defense satellites were gone. A fleet of strange ships slid out of the dark like knives. They were black, no lights, no signals. They moved fast, faster than anything built by humans. Inside the colony, alarms screamed. People ran through corridors trying to reach shelters. Parents lifted their children and tried to calm them, but the air shook as the first beams hit the domes. Glass cracked. Oxygen hissed into the sky. The colony's defense commander, an old officer named Rena, sent a desperate message. "We are under attack. Unknown enemy. Please help." The signal raced toward Earth, a small pulse of light in the endless night. The attackers gave no warning, no demand, no chance to surrender. They fired until the domes broke and the towers fell. Ships trying to escape were cut in half. In less than 20 minutes, the colony was silent. The only sound left was the wind of leaking air and the echo of Rena's broken call for help. But the attackers made one mistake. The freighter that had seen the first flash hid behind a moon and stayed silent. Its crew recorded everything: the black ships, the destruction, the screams. When the enemy left, the freighter fled at maximum speed. It carried the proof, and the last survivors from the colony, to Earth. On Earth, the message arrived like a knife. The leaders sat in a round hall deep under the city of Geneva. They watched the recordings in silence. They saw children running, domes breaking, fire in space. They saw ships they had never seen before. No one spoke for a long time. Even the air felt heavy. Finally the Secretary General stood up. Her hands shook. "This is not a border raid," she said. "This is extermination." The admirals around her stared at the table. For 100 years humans had been cautious in space. They had joined councils, signed treaties, promised peace. They had built only small fleets, enough to guard their trade routes. They thought the galaxy was safe. Now they knew the truth. In a hidden shipyard under the clouds of Saturn, giant shadows waited. Earth had kept a secret. While it spoke of peace, it built something else: huge carriers, stealth destroyers, siege craft the size of cities. 700,000 warships, asleep under false signals, buried in gas giants and asteroids. It was the largest force ever built by one species. Only a few leaders knew it existed. The Secretary General looked at the admirals. "We wanted peace," she said, "but they have brought war to our homes. We will answer." Across the solar system, coded orders flashed. Deep under the ice of Europa, shipyards woke. In the red dust of Mars, hangars opened. On Earth's oceans, hidden docks rose from the waves. Warships crawled out like sleeping beasts. Engines that had been cold for decades came alive. Humans had been patient. They had been careful. Now they were angry. The freighter's captain, still pale from what he had seen, stood before the council. "They killed everyone," he whispered. "They didn't even speak." The Secretary General's eyes were like steel. "Then we will speak for them," she said. "And the stars will hear us." In the next days, news spread through the networks. People saw the recordings. They saw the faces of the dead. Something old stirred inside billions of hearts: fear, rage, unity. Miners on the moons volunteered. Farmers on Mars joined militias. Pilots who had retired came back. Earth called, and humanity answered. At the edge of the solar system, scouts searched for traces of the enemy. In secret rooms, analysts studied the black ships, their weapons, their patterns. Nobody knew who they were or where they came from. Only one thing was clear: they would come again. And next time, humans would be ready. Far beyond, in a cluster of dark stars, the enemy commanders watched their screens. They had crushed many species before. They had never faced humans at full strength. They did not know that their attack had awoken a giant. They did not know that a single plea for help had become a storm. In the cold void between worlds, 700,000 warships began to move. The solar system was no longer quiet. In hidden bases under ice, rock, and sea, ships rose like sleeping giants. For decades they had been only numbers in secret files. Now they were real: black hulls, glowing engines, weapons older than some nations. Dock workers stood on platforms watching them move. Some cheered. Some were silent. All of them felt the same thing: something huge was about to happen. In orbit around Earth, the great assembly ship Atlas hung like a steel mountain. Its decks were crowded with soldiers, engineers, and officers. They had been called back from civilian life with only a single order: prepare for war. Nobody said who the enemy was. The images from the destroyed colony were enough. Captain Armin stood at the window of the command deck. He had been retired for 10 years. He had taught at a small flight school on Mars, training young pilots to fly cargo ships. Now he wore a black uniform again. His eyes followed the endless line of warships streaming past the station. 700,000, he whispered. I never thought I would see them awake. Beside him, a young officer named Kira spoke quietly. Sir, intelligence has no name for the attackers. Only a symbol: the Black Swarm. Armin's jaw tightened. We'll give them a name, he said, when we're done. Across the system, news channels tried to show what was happening, but most of the mobilization was hidden. People only saw small things: convoys of fuel ships, sudden blackouts in shipyards, families packing and leaving orbital stations. Everyone felt the weight in the air. Something old and dangerous was moving under the surface of human society. In a dark room under Geneva, the council met again. Maps and star charts glowed on the walls. The Secretary-General listened to reports from scouts and codebreakers. Still no clear information about the enemy. No language, no signals, only weapons. But one report made everyone sit up. A deep space probe had caught a faint trail of exotic radiation moving toward the edge of human space. The same signature as the black ships. They are coming again, a scientist said. But not to the same place. They're moving toward the mining stations at Kepler Gate. The Secretary-General looked at the admirals. We have one chance to stop them before they strike again, she said. Operation Iron Veil begins now. Back on the Atlas, alarms sounded. Pilots ran to their fighters. Engineers locked down hatches. In the hangars, rows of ships waited: sleek interceptors, heavy destroyers, carriers the size of cities. Their hulls still carried fake registry codes from decades of hiding. Now the codes were erased. The true symbols of Earth appeared again: the blue and silver crest of humanity. Kira followed Armin down a long corridor. Sir, are we really ready for this? We haven't fought a full war in 100 years. Armin didn't answer at first. He walked past lines of young soldiers, many no older than his students at the flight school. They looked at him as he passed. Some were afraid. Some were eager. All were silent. Finally he said, Nobody is ready for war. But we are all here because someone decided to kill our people. We'll do what we must. Beyond Neptune, a hidden gate opened. A massive formation of human warships slipped into the dark. Their engines left no trail. Their weapons were cold, waiting. They moved toward the Kepler Gate like a silent storm. Inside one of the black enemy ships, far away, alien eyes studied human transmissions. They had destroyed dozens of colonies of other species before. None had answered so quickly. None had built such a fleet in secret. The commander of the swarm tilted its head. It did not understand the idea of revenge. It did not understand that humans were different. On the Atlas, Armin sat in the command chair. Kira brought him a data pad. Message from Earth, sir. For every lost life, 100 ships rise. Armin closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the recordings from the colony, the children running, the breaking domes. He felt something old inside him, not just anger but something sharper. Set course for Kepler Gate, he ordered. We'll meet them there. In the dark beyond Pluto, the first human scouts saw the enemy again. Black ships gliding like shadows, thousands of them. They sent the coordinates back to the fleet. The trap was set. Back on Earth, billions watched the sky. No one knew what would happen next. Some prayed. Some cursed. All waited. In the silence between the stars, two forces moved toward each other, one born of cold hunger, the other born of rage and unity. Soon they would meet. And when they did, the galaxy would learn what humans had been building in secret. The dark between stars was wide and empty. But now it held two armies. On one side, the black swarm slid like a living shadow. On the other, the hidden fleet of humanity crept forward in silence. Each side thought it was the hunter. Neither spoke. Neither blinked. Space itself felt like it was holding its breath. Inside the flagship Atlas, Captain Armin leaned over a glowing map. Dots marked enemy ships moving through the Kepler Gate region. His own fleet formed a long crescent behind a cluster of asteroids. The plan was simple: let the swarm cross the gate, then hit them from all sides. The order from Earth was clear: stop them here or lose everything beyond. Kira moved between consoles, reading new signals. They are almost inside the trap, she said. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. She had never been in a real battle. No one her age had. This was the first war of their lives. On Mars, families watched from public screens. A single feed showed only a blue symbol and the words, Operation Iron Veil in progress. Nobody knew the details. But everyone remembered the burning colony and the screams. All across the solar system, miners, farmers, and pilots whispered the same word: revenge. The enemy ships crossed the invisible line. They moved in a perfect pattern, like one creature with many arms. They did not send scouts. They did not slow down. They expected no resistance. Armin's eyes narrowed. All units, he said, prepare to fire on my mark. Across thousands of cockpits, pilots tightened their gloves. Fingers hovered over triggers. Some muttered quiet prayers. Others stared straight ahead, jaws set. The warship's engines dimmed until they were almost dark, waiting. A single moment stretched long and thin. Kira felt her heart hammering in her ears. Through the window she saw the enemy fleet sliding past, dark against the stars. They're inside, sir, she whispered. Armin raised his hand. Now, he said. Space erupted. Human warships lit up like a second sunrise. From behind asteroids, from hidden gates, from silent positions, beams and missiles streaked out. The first wave smashed into the center of the swarm. Black ships broke apart, their hulls tearing in white fire. For the first time, the enemy turned. Kira gasped. We hit them. We actually hit them. But the victory lasted only seconds. The swarm moved faster than anyone had seen before. It split and reformed, twisting through the fire. Dark shapes darted between missiles, firing back beams of green light. A human destroyer vanished in a flash. A carrier's shields burned bright, then went out. Armin barked orders. Group 3, flank left. Carriers, launch second wave. His voice was calm but his eyes were sharp. He had flown through battles long ago. He knew chaos. He felt it rising now. Hundreds of small fighters shot out of carriers, swarming like sparks. They weaved between enemy ships, firing torpedoes at close range. The space around Kepler Gate turned into a storm of metal and fire. On Earth, a young girl sat with her grandmother watching the silent blue screen. Will they win? She asked. The old woman did not answer. She had lived through the last great war on Earth. She knew how thin victory could be. Back in the battle, Kira saw an enemy ship diving toward the Atlas. "Incoming!" she shouted. The flagship shook as beams slammed into its shields. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Crew members held on to their stations. Armin's voice cut through the noise. "Hold steady. Return fire." Massive guns on the Atlas turned and roared. The enemy ship broke apart and spun away, glowing. But more black ships poured through the gate. For every one destroyed, 3 more came. The trap was holding, but only barely. In the heart of the swarm, alien commanders watched the human response. They had not expected hidden warships. They had not expected such fury. Their minds flickered with a thought they did not have a word for: danger. Kira wiped blood from a cut on her forehead. "Sir, our losses are rising. We can't hold this line forever." Armin stared at the map. A red cluster marked the enemy center. "Then we break their heart," he said. "Signal the dreadnoughts. Full burn. We go straight for the command core." Far off, 10 massive ships shifted their course. They were the oldest and largest of Earth's secret fleet, each a city of guns. Engines flared bright as suns as they charged. "Sir," Kira said, eyes wide. "That's suicide." "It's war," Armin replied. "And it's our turn." The dreadnoughts plunged into the swarm like spears. Their weapons fired in all directions, cutting paths through black ships. Enemy fire hammered them, but they kept going, shields glowing, hulls burning. On the bridge of the Atlas, everyone felt the deck vibrate as power built. Armin gripped the arm of his chair. "All ships, follow the dreadnoughts. Break through now." The human fleet roared forward, engines flaring. Missiles streaked. Fighters screamed past. In the distance, the enemy command ship loomed, a black pyramid bigger than any other vessel. For a heartbeat, Kira forgot her fear. She saw the whole scene, the endless stars, the blazing ships, the dark enemy. She felt small but also proud. Humanity had come out of hiding. They were fighting back. The Atlas dove after the dreadnoughts, straight into the center of the swarm. Around them, space burned. No one knew who would survive. No one knew if the trap would hold. But the galaxy was watching, and the outcome would change everything. The Kepler gate burned like a sun. Explosions flared in every direction, turning the black emptiness into a storm of light. The human dreadnoughts plowed deeper into the swarm, their hulls glowing red from constant hits. Around them smaller ships darted, fighters flashing past like angry sparks. In the center of it all, the black pyramid loomed, the enemy's command ship, cold and silent. On the bridge of the Atlas, alarms howled. Panels spat sparks, the air smelled of metal and smoke. Kira clutched the edge of her console to stay on her feet. "Shields at 40%, she shouted. 2 destroyers down on the right flank." Armin didn't blink. His eyes were locked on the map. The red mark of the command ship pulsed like a heartbeat. "Stay on course," he said. "If we cut off the head, the body dies." Outside, the dreadnought Hammer of Dawn was hit by a green lance. Its shields collapsed. For a moment it hung in the fire, then its reactors went critical and it tore itself apart. The blast shook even the Atlas. Everyone felt the deck tilt under their boots. Kira's voice cracked. "Sir, we're losing them one by one." Armin's jaw tightened. "We can't turn back now." He looked across the bridge at a hollow of Earth. It had been there since the ship launched, a small reminder of home. He thought of the colony's children running under broken domes. He thought of the freighter's captain whispering about the slaughter. His voice hardened. "All ships, concentrate fire on the pyramid. Everything we've got." Across the fleet, massive cannons turned as one. Torpedoes launched. Beams fired. For the first time the black pyramid flickered. Its shields glowed, then cracked like ice. On the alien command deck, tall shapes shifted. Their minds were linked, their thoughts moving faster than speech. They had crushed many species before. None had aimed straight for their heart. None had built such weapons in secret. Something like unease crept into the swarm's collective mind. The humans pressed in closer. Dreadnoughts rammed enemy cruisers out of the way. Fighters swarmed over black hulls, planting charges and peeling off before they exploded. In every cockpit, pilots felt the same mix of fear and defiance. They knew they might not live, but they would strike. Kira saw the pyramid shudder on her screen. "We're breaking through," she shouted. Hope flared across the bridge. But then the enemy moved. The swarm shifted formation in a way no human had ever seen. Thousands of black ships spun and joined their beams into a single, blinding lance. It struck the lead dreadnought and carved straight through its spine. The giant ship broke apart silently, pieces tumbling away. Then the lance swung toward the Atlas. "Evasive!" Kira screamed. Armin slammed a command into the console. The Atlas rolled just as the beam sliced past, tearing 3 escorts to shreds. The bridge lurched, people crashed against walls. Warning lights turned the air red. "We can't take another hit like that," Kira gasped. Armin steadied himself. "Then we finish it before they fire again." He opened a secure channel. "This is Captain Armin to all surviving dreadnoughts. We're going in close. Prepare the Nova charge." There was a pause, then a deep voice replied. "Confirmed. Nova charge armed." Kira turned to him, eyes wide. "Sir, the Nova charge will kill everything within 1,000 kilometers. Including us." Armin's expression didn't change. "If we don't, Earth dies next. This is our chance." Outside, the remaining dreadnoughts formed a spearhead with the Atlas at its point. Engines flared bright. Enemy fire raked them, but they kept going. The Black Pyramid loomed larger, its surface crawling with strange runes. Through cracks in its shields, green light spilled out like blood. On Mars, in a crowded shelter, the same little girl stared at the blue screen. The symbol flickered. She whispered to her grandmother, "They're going to win, aren't they?" The old woman put a hand on her head but still didn't answer. In the battle, Kira's hands shook as she keyed the final sequence. "Nova charge ready," she said softly. Armin gripped the arm of his chair. He felt strangely calm, as if all the noise had faded. "For the colony," he whispered. "For Earth." Then louder. "All ships now." The spearhead slammed into the pyramid's shield. At the same time the Nova charges detonated. White light blossomed, brighter than any sun. It swallowed the center of the swarm. For a heartbeat there was no sound, no motion, only light. Then the shockwave hit. The Atlas was thrown like a toy. Consoles blew apart. People tumbled. Outside, enemy ships spun out of control, their links broken. The Black Pyramid cracked from top to base, its core spilling green fire into the void. Kira crawled back to her station. It's working," she coughed. "Their formation is breaking." Armin forced himself upright. On the screen he saw enemy ships scattering, firing wildly. Without their command ship they looked lost, like pieces of a broken machine. "Signal Earth," he said. "Tell them we struck the heart." But even as he spoke, new red marks appeared on the map. More enemy signatures at the edge of the system, moving fast. The swarm was larger than they had thought. Kira stared at the screen. "There are more coming," she whispered. "So many more." Armin closed his eyes for a moment. He had no more plans, only the will to fight. "Then we hold," he said quietly. "As long as it takes." Outside, the shattered pyramid drifted, still burning. Around it, human ships and enemy ships tumbled through wreckage. The battle at Kepler Gate was not over. It had only begun. Wreckage drifted around the Kepler Gate like black snow. Broken hulls spun silently, flashing in the dim light of dying fires. Human ships and enemy ships both floated there, some still burning, some cold. For a few moments it looked as if nothing was left alive. But deep inside the chaos, engines were still turning, orders still whispered, and weapons still armed. On the bridge of the Atlas, the lights flickered. Smoke curled from shattered panels. Kira coughed and wiped soot from her face. "Shields gone," she said hoarsely. "Main guns offline. But we're still moving." Armin stared at the tactical screen. The Black Pyramid was cracked and drifting, green fire spilling out of it like veins. Hundreds of enemy ships were scattering without order. Yet at the edge of the map a new wave of red marks pulsed. They were larger, faster, and closing in. His knuckles were white on the armrest. "It's only the first claw," he murmured. "The swarm's real body is still out there." Kira looked at him, eyes wide. "We can't fight another wave like that. Half the fleet is gone." Armin nodded once. "Then we don't fight them the same way." He opened a channel to the surviving captains. Static hissed. Then a dozen grim faces appeared. "This is Armin," he said. "We've hurt them, but we're bleeding too. If we stand still, we're dead. We need to move now. We fall back behind the gate, draw them into the corridor, and hit them piece by piece." A captain with blood on his temple spoke up. "And the civilians at Kepler Station?" Armin's face hardened. "We take them with us. Every ship that can still carry passengers will dock and load survivors. No one gets left behind." Outside, tugs and shuttles darted through wreckage toward the battered station. On its decks miners, scientists, and families waited with wide eyes. They had watched the sky light up and thought it was the end. Now they saw human warships limping toward them like wounded beasts. Hope flickered. In the command center of the enemy, far beyond human sensors, alien minds hissed and twisted. The loss of the pyramid was not the end, but an insult. New vessels were already on their way, heavier, armed with weapons not yet seen. The swarm learned fast. It had seen humanity's rage and would now answer with its own. Back at the Kepler gate, the human fleet formed a ragged convoy. Engines glowed weakly. Fighters circled like tired birds, scanning for ambush. Kira watched the loading reports scroll past. 5,000 civilians aboard so far. 8,000, 10,000. Armin gave short nods. Every number felt like a small victory. The girl on Mars still sat in front of the blue screen. The symbol flickered, then changed to a live feed, a single warship's camera showing lines of evacuees being pulled aboard under the glow of burning wreckage. The girl squeezed her grandmother's hand. "They're saving them," she whispered. On the Atlas, Kira looked up. "All evacuees loaded, sir. Last shuttles inbound." Armin exhaled. "Then we go." He keyed the fleet channel. "All units, form jump formation. Prepare to retreat through the gate on my mark. Fighters cover the rear. Dreadnoughts provide shield." But as the convoy began to move, the edge of space rippled. Out of the dark slid new shapes, bigger than the first wave, spined and jagged, with glowing cores like captured stars. Their engines pulsed a color no human had ever seen. They weren't just ships, they looked like living things wrapped in armor. Kira's voice cracked. "They're here." Armin felt a cold calm settle over him. "Then we buy time." He opened the channel to every ship. "Listen to me," he said. "You've seen what they do to our people. You've seen our dead. Today you've also seen them bleed. We hold them for as long as it takes to get the civilians out. We are the wall. Earth is behind us." Across 1,000 cockpits, hands steadied. Pilots tightened straps. Engineers fed power to dying engines. People who had thought they were beaten straightened their backs. The first of the new enemy ships fired. Beams slashed across the void, hitting the outer ring of escorts. 2 frigates blew apart. Fighters swarmed to meet them, weaving through green fire. "Rear shields up," Kira shouted. "Keep the convoy moving." Armin answered. "Do not stop. We hold." The Atlas swung around, placing its broken hull between the enemy and the retreating ships. Its guns spat weak but steady bursts. All along the line, Human warships did the same, a battered wall of steel and light. One by one the civilian ships slipped through the gate, engines flaring as they jumped. Every time one vanished into safety, cheers erupted in the battered bridges of the escorts. Every time another human ship died, the cheers turned to silence, then to grim focus. Kira watched the counter tick down. 3,000 civilians left. 2,500. Another hit slammed into the Atlas. The deck shook. Sparks rained. Kira clung to her station. Hull breach on deck 6. Seal it, Armin ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered. Outside, the new enemy ships pressed closer, like wolves around a fire. But the wall held. More shuttles vanished into the gate. The counter reached 0. All civilians through, Kira gasped. Armin nodded once. Then we go. He keyed the fleet. All units, final jump. Fighters fall back on my mark. We leave together. Engines flared. The battered fleet turned toward the gate. Behind them the new swarm gathered, charging its weapons. Ahead lay the cold blue mouth of the jump corridor. Armin stared at it. He knew the enemy would follow. He knew the war was only beginning. But for this moment, he had done what he could. Mark! He shouted. The Atlas and the last escorts leapt through the gate as green beams sliced past. In the next heartbeat, the void was empty except for wreckage and the rising enemy fleet. The jump corridor spat the battered human fleet back into normal space. Stars snapped into view, cold and sharp. For a moment there was only silence, no alarms, no enemy fire, just the heavy breathing of crews who had survived. Wrecked ships drifted at the edge of formation, their hulls scarred and glowing. Engines hissed. People stared at screens, trying to believe they were still alive. On the bridge of the Atlas, Kira slumped against her console. We made it, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. All the civilians, they're safe. Armin didn't answer. He was watching the jump window behind them, its blue mouth still shimmering. They'll follow, he said quietly. We've shown them where we hide. Across the fleet, damage reports poured in. Whole decks gone. Ammunition low. Shields burned out. But also a line that made everyone straighten. Civilians evacuated, 100%. That number gave strength to exhausted hands. In orbit of a gas giant named Vera, hidden shipyards came alive. Huge frames rose out of the clouds, dripping fuel like rain. These were deeper than the Saturn yards, darker, never meant to be revealed. For decades they had been a myth even inside the military. Now orders screamed across encrypted channels. Repair the fleet, reload, prepare for counterstrike. As the Atlas limped into dock, workers swarmed over its hull. Fires hissed out. Broken panels were cut away. Through a cracked window, Kira saw hundreds of other ships doing the same. It looks like an ant nest, she murmured. Armin removed his blackened gloves. His hands shook but his eyes stayed hard. It's not over, he said. This was only a holding action. Now we plan. Deep under the gas giant, a war council gathered in a hollow sphere lit by floating screens. Admirals, engineers, pilots, and scientists stood in concentric circles. Above them hung a three-dimensional map of known space. Red marks showed the enemy. They spread like ink across the starfield. The Secretary-General's face appeared on a screen. She looked older than before. You have done more than anyone thought possible, she said. You saved thousands. You proved the swarm can be hurt. But they will come again, and in greater force. We cannot just defend. We must take the fight to them. A murmur passed through the circle. For 100 years humans had built in secret but always thought of defense. Now they were being asked to strike first. A scientist stepped forward. We have been studying debris from the Black Pyramid. Its core carries a strange energy signature, a kind of pulse used to link their minds. If we can disrupt it, we can break their coordination. Kira, standing at the back, whispered to herself. Break the link, break the swarm. Armin raised his head. What do you need? A delivery system, the scientist said. Something large enough to carry a pulse generator into their space and survive long enough to trigger it. The admirals exchanged looks. One spoke. We have a hull. Old project. Never completed. Code name Nemesis. Bigger than a dreadnought. Built to carry experimental weapons. We can finish it in weeks if every yard works on it. The Secretary General nodded. Then do it. Humanity will not wait to be slaughtered. Orders rippled outward. In the shipyards, lights burned day and night. Workers welded, bolted, and sealed. Engines the size of towers were lowered into frames. Across the system, pilots trained in new tactics, learning to fight without central commands in case the swarm cut their communications. Civilians sent parts, food, and fuel, turning their grief into work. On the Atlas, Kira walked the quiet corridors. She passed bunks filled with sleeping crew, faces pale in dim light. Some clutched photos. Some whispered names. She stopped at a small observation port and stared at the stars. We're not just fighting for revenge anymore, she said softly. We're fighting for a place to exist. Armin joined her. He looked out at the shipyards. They think we're broken, he said. But they only woke us up. Beyond human space, the swarm gathered. The loss of the pyramid had stung, but it had also taught. New commanders whispered through the link. They would crush the humans' hidden nests, burn their worlds, erase their name. Yet somewhere in that dark network, a faint doubt had started, like a crack in glass. Back on Vera, the hull of Nemesis rose from the clouds. Its skin was black, its engines deep red. It looked less like a ship than a spearhead aimed at the heart of the galaxy. Engineers walked its decks whispering, as if in a temple. Kira watched the new ship take shape and felt a shiver. It's beautiful, she said. And terrifying. Armin nodded. Good. That's what we need. In a hidden training bay, squads of pilots stood in a circle around a hologram of alien ships. They were learning to break formations, to scatter and regroup without orders, to fight as independent hunters. Each carried a small emblem on their sleeve, a blue circle with 7 stars, the mark of the lost colony. News of the plan spread quietly through the fleet. People began to whisper a phrase. We take the fight to them. It moved from hangar to hangar, from deck to deck, until it was a chant. At the end of the day, Kira looked at Armin. Do you think we can win? He thought of the colony, the fire, the little girl watching the blue screen on Mars, the new ship rising from the clouds. We're not fighting alone anymore, he said. The whole species is behind us. That's how we win. Far away, the swarm shifted. New signatures appeared on human sensors, enormous shapes moving through deep space. The enemy was also building something. In the quiet before the next storm, Nemesis floated above the gas giant, almost ready. The galaxy had been a place of secrets and shadows. Soon it would be a battlefield. The gas giant Vera glowed below like a swirling storm. Above it, the ship Nemesis hung ready. Its black hull drank the starlight. Inside, every deck hummed with power. Engineers sealed the last plates. Pilots ran checks on fighters. Soldiers strapped in. After months of hiding and building, humanity was no longer waiting. It was about to strike. On the bridge of the Atlas, Kira stood beside Armin, looking at the huge new vessel through the window. It doesn't look like a ship, she said softly. It looks like a blade. Armin's face was hard. It is a blade, he replied. And today we use it. Across the system, screens flickered on. Civilians watched the images, the vast ship rising, fighters swarming, the fleet forming behind it. For years they had only seen defense. Now they saw the counterattack. Miners on the moons whispered, for the colony. Farmers on Mars whispered, for the children. Pilots whispered, for Earth. Billions of voices became one low tide of will. Inside the Nemesis, Scientists and engineers checked the pulse generator. It was a silver core wrapped in cables, humming with invisible force. One spark from it could break the swarm's mind link if placed close enough. But to do that, the ship had to plunge deep into enemy space. Kira's hands trembled on the console. "We've never done this before," she said. "No one has." Armin looked at her. "No one ever built a fleet like ours either. Remember that." Orders rippled. Docks released their clamps. Engines came alive. The fleet began to move, a long spear with Nemesis at its point. Fighters darted along its edges like bright fish around a shark. Far beyond, the swarm waited. Its new ships were larger, their cores burning brighter than green suns. They massed at the edge of a dead system, claws spread wide. In their linked minds was a single command: destroy. When the human fleet emerged from jump, the enemy was already there. Black shapes filled the void like a living wall. For a heartbeat nothing moved. Then the swarm shifted, splitting into two claws to encircle. Armin gave his orders quietly. Outer wings engage. Fighters scatter. Dreadnoughts hold the line. Nemesis, go straight for their core. Protect it with your lives. All units, copy, voices answered. Space erupted again. Missiles and beams flashed. Fighters screamed between enemy ships, striking at joints, peeling off before fire could catch them. Human warships held formation tighter than before, no longer panicked, fighting as one living thing. Years of training in secret now showed itself. This time the swarm's claws did not close easily. Inside the Nemesis, the pulse generator began to charge. Lights dimmed. The hum deepened into a low vibration that shook the deck. Scientists watched numbers climb. 30%, 50, 70. On the enemy command node, alien minds felt the strange vibration. It crawled along their link like static. They had felt pain before, but never this. Fear rippled through them, thin and sharp. Kira's voice shook. Enemy ships closing on Nemesis. Shields at 80%. Armin's knuckles were white. "Hold them," he said. "Just hold them." Fighters swarmed the attackers, ramming when they had no ammunition left. Dreadnoughts turned their massive guns on any ship that came near the black blade. Pieces of alien hull tumbled away, glowing. "Pulse at 90%, a scientist called. "Final position in 60 seconds. Kira whispered, "Come on, come on." The swarm sensed the danger. Its ships surged forward in a desperate rush. Green lances stabbed at the Nemesis. One dreadnought slid between and took the hit, breaking apart silently. Another did the same. The blade kept moving. "Position reached," the scientist said. "Firing pulse." For a moment there was no sound. Then a silent wave burst outward from the Nemesis, invisible but vast. It rolled across the enemy fleet like a tide through sand. On every alien ship, lights flickered. Movements jerked. Weapons ceased firing. The link that bound them snapped like a string. The black ships drifted, confused, no longer one mind but thousands of lost creatures. Kira gasped. It worked. Armin did not cheer. "Finish it," he ordered. Human warships surged forward. Coordinated fire ripped through the stunned enemy. Fighters darted in pairs, cutting engines and cores. The giant black ships tried to react but moved like blind animals. One by one they broke apart, silent in the dark. Inside the swarm's shattered command node, alien commanders felt something new: isolation. They had never been alone. Now each was a separate mind in a dying body. And in their last thought flickered a memory of a small signal from a human colony, ignored. Hours later, the void was quiet again. Wreckage drifted. Here and there small fires glowed. But the Black Fleet was gone. Only scattered ships fled into the dark. Humanity had stood, struck back, and survived. On the Atlas, Kira stared at the screens. "It's over," she whispered. Armin looked out at the stars. "No, he said softly. It's only the first time they've seen us. Now the galaxy knows what we are. Back on Mars, the little girl watched a new feed. Instead of a blue symbol, there was a picture of the fleet returning, fighters flying in formation around the Nemesis. She smiled for the first time in weeks. In orbit of Vera, workers and soldiers stood on decks, watching their ships return. They did not shout. They did not cheer. They only stood, silent and proud, eyes fixed on the stars. Humanity had answered a single plea for help. And the stars had shaken.